Okay guys, so let's take a look at what we're going to be working on here. Yep, we're working on a Nintendo. For the first time, I'm going to try to do one of these on camera. Actually, I'm going to be doing 2 of them. I bought both of these on a auction site. They were sold as broken, 4 parts not working. I'm pretty sure the reason they did that is because they have no cords and because they're drawn on with what looks like crayon and full of gunk and disgusting stuff. And this one is just completely yellow and missing the door, and I can actually see the remnants of the hinge for the door right here stuck in there. These should be totally fixable. In fact, this one, with all the writing on it, we might be able to keep the original shell on. Typically what I do with the shells though is keep them and clean them and just keep them as backups and use those for other repair projects where I don't mod consoles. These, I think, or at least one of them is going to be modded, so we'll probably do a whole new shell on them as well. But the first thing I like to do when I get these things is try to play them exactly as they are and see if they even turn on and play. So pardon the mess in the background. You know, typically I have all kinds of projects going on and repair jobs. Right now I'm actually working on an issue with the Sony Trinitron. We have the yellowed one plugged in first, and let's see if it gets power. All right, so that's a good sign. It's blinking red. Let's try to put a game in. You want to make sure your cables are plugged in, right? So let's do that. So one thing I'm noticing immediately is we're getting no screen flashes despite the console being on. Hey, we got something. That's a good sign. That usually means these things work. This one, oh, I can see it right there. Hey, look at that. You have to hold it just right in there, which usually tells me it's just an issue with the pin connector. And once we clean that up, this thing will probably work totally fine. At worst, maybe issues with the PPU, but I doubt it. Very rarely do I see that. Yeah, I think this one will probably be completely good to go. If I could get it far enough, which this is going to be a terrible way. I'm now plugging in a controller. You can see there's some action on the screen there. We want to at least try to get something going and see if we can hear it. Okay. So yeah, this thing totally works. And we can probably repair this and make it a nice new console. All the sound is working, buttons are working, controls are working. I think it's good to go. On to the second one. Let's see if this thing works. Flashing light and flashing screen, good signs. This one is gross. I'm sorry I'm doing this to my copy of Castlevania. Hey, that one boots right up. Definitely noticing some strange video banding issues. I don't think that's normal. Although, admittedly, I've also been looking at these things through really nice outputs lately, but it looks like this one might have some more issues. But it does work. Turns on and plays. You can see probably the really weird, like, wiggly banding issues. I've never seen that before. So we'll see what we can find out about that online too. But the thing plays, so that's a good sign. But since we're going to be working on these 2 Nintendos at the same time and repairing them at the same time, we know they both have slightly different issues. What I like to do is look for something identifying on each of them that will kind of let me know, hey, this is the one you're working on. So in this case, other than the fact that they look pretty different visually, on the bottom of this one, we're missing the expansion bay cover. This one has it. Additionally, since one of the last steps I'll probably take is fully cleaning the shells, I'm also noting that this one has this disgusting goop mark here. This one doesn't. Finally, if I look inside of them, and you guys won't be able to see this, but the one that was playing the games better, the darkened yellowed one, I can see the pins on the pin connector are actually pretty well maintained. The sides of them are pushed too far apart, but the middle pins are in there pretty good. So actually, that's another easy way to kind of tell. This one, however, I can see that the pins are spread out all the way across, so that may be our issue. My fear is a PPU issue. There's not much you can do about that other than replace the PPU, but I have faith that no Nintendo is a broken Nintendo, so we'll see what we can do. Before we go any further in the video, I also just want to say, everybody has their own process for repairing, refurbishing, cleaning these things. Mine is probably a little different and ridiculous, but it's just what I like to do. And that being said, everybody does things differently, so don't judge me. This is how I like to do things, and it's never failed me. All right, so we got the top shell off. You can see there in the corner where the door hinge is stuck in there, so we'll just be taking that out. Yeah, we may use this shell, it just depends. This would be one that would be a good candidate for maybe retro brighting if you really wanted to. I'm not a fan of that personally. I've seen mixed results with retro brighting. I usually like to just sand and paint them. get our screws out here so we can put them away and not lose them like I have so many times before. I like to put my screws in the shell. This thing is really gross. Blech. Oh God, that's gross. Yeah, Nintendo's, you know, these things came out in the 80s, so they're a little old now. They're in their 40s, or approaching their 40s. So now we're removing the RF shield. In an interesting twist of events, it seems this is a rare Nintendo that's never been opened. It has all of the screws inside. Usually I see them missing at least a few screws, especially on the RF shielding. People never tend to put them all back in. I don't know why. This one has all of them. That little lip right there will get kind of caught under this. You just need to pull it forward a little bit, it'll pop right out. There's your RF shield. This thing is pretty gross. You have some options here moving forward. Now I am going to be pretty much completely deconstructing everything I can, including the cartridge bay here, because I'm going to need to remove the pin connector, and I'm going to boil it, and I'll show you that process as well. Remember to try to keep your screws together in the parts that they came from. That's the best advice I can give. You might have noticed I lifted up on the whole black part a little bit to get those screws out. They get misaligned and get hard to pull out, so if you just jiggle it a little bit, you can get those screws out easier. Now that you have the screws removed, you can pretty much just lift up on this, kind of hold the RF shielding for the bottom part, and pull this out. And that is your cartridge depressor. Now if you look back here near all of the power stuff, video outputs and all that, there's two screws. There's one right there, and there's one right here. We're going to remove those. And now we can mostly remove this main board. Just be careful, there are still things attached to it. So as you can see, we have the controllers as well as power connected here. And this might look intimidating. It's really not. We're just going to twist it around here. You can see where these connect, and we're literally going to pull, and they should pop right out. It's moving very slowly. This thing must have never been taken apart. There we go. That thing was really wedged in there. Wow. Never had one that hard to take out. From here we can remove the bottom RF shielding, and now you have a detached board. That tells you it's a North American console, NTSC. Good stuff. What I will do with this for now is set it aside. In a little bit, I'll show you the process of removing the PPU. We're going to install an NES RGB mod into this thing, as long as everything works. But for now, we're going to pop off the cartridge connector, and all you have to do here is pull right off. It pops right off. Just remember the shorter side is the part that attaches, not that it'll go on any other way. Now, typically this is the part where I would say you're good to go, but this thing is so dirty. We're going to take this part, we're going to take this whole thing and just soak it, because it needs it. So let's go ahead and remove the other components here. There are two screws on the power and reset buttons here and under these wires here. Now go figure, as soon as I moved the camera to get better in here, they popped right out. But there you go, so that is actually attached to nothing now. That's what attaches to the board there to turn on the power. So we can put this to the side, and I like to keep those screws right in their place so you don't lose these, and these you're gonna have to kind of clean manually by hand. The final step here, and the grossest part, oh my God, look at all that dirt and gross shit in there. That is nasty. We're gonna take out the controller ports here, and there's two screws right here. We're just gonna gently take those out. You're hearing the cartridge door creaking. I promise it's fine. It's okay. It'll be fine. I just don't want all that dust going all over the floor. You push that up and pull down. Comes right out. Now the controller ports, you actually plug those in from the front. So you just pull them right out here. Ta-da! Isn't that cool? So we now have a Nintendo that has been pretty much totally deconstructed. So what do I do from here? Well, I clean it. Starting with the plastic shells and the RF shields, all that good stuff. We're just gonna soak it all in soap and water and pray for the best. One other thing I forgot to mention, there are screws in the top shell here. These are very difficult to get out, at least in my experience. I am gonna remove them. You usually need a flathead screwdriver and a lot of patience. You do not wanna strip these, but you can remove them. So to show you this process, I've already started on this one, but you really wanna make sure you get into that groove. And what I suggest is just kind of like pushing down first. And just kind of like, you know, really make sure you have a good grip, okay? Once you're in there, I'm gonna let the camera focus here. I'm on camera, there you go. I hold down as best as I can, I push as hard as I can, and I just very slowly, while pushing down still, start twisting until I feel them give. These things, I have stripped so many of these little tiny screws, and finding replacements for them is a pain. You don't really need them, but you do. And maybe this one you might hear the click. When we start moving it, you'll hear the plastic giving here. See if you can hear it. Hear that? That means you're pretty much in the gold. You just need to, again, push down really hard. Not too hard though. And just start twisting. You should be okay. So this one should now pop out. And it did. Fell right out. Now the other one. This one has 3, and there's also one in the corner here. So it's interesting to note these little metal things here. These are what hold in the cartridge door. And I find these to be the most pain in the ass because my screwdriver that I use to do this, unfortunately, is just a little bit too wide. So just be careful. They're exactly like the other screws. And my process is a little bit different because my screwdriver doesn't fit properly. This one may work, but it gives me less grip, which is why I don't like using it. And also it tends to strip them easier. But we'll try. Hey, that one worked. Okay, good stuff. There it is. We got it. I feel like I damaged that one a little bit. How does that look? No, not too bad actually. You can see a little bit of damage at the top there, but nothing major. And that one popped right out too. So now we're taking all this stuff and we are literally going to soak it, even the metal parts. Yes, I am going that deep on it. We'll just have to dry them really well right after. Okay guys, so ignoring the dishes that haven't been done, here's how we're gonna do this. I'm filming this kind of weird, it's kind of sideways, but hopefully it's not too bad. So I like to start by running water, and I like to get it hot. And then I like to use the good old Dawn dish detergent. This stuff has never failed me. Now, as I said, you need to remember, there are metal parts in this plastic, specifically in the cartridge bay, and of course the RF shielding. They're just so damn dirty that I'm going the brutal route of soaking everything and then drying it. I've never had an issue with doing the RF shields like that anyway, because they're usually already kind of rusted anyway. But I've never had an issue with doing this and everything being okay. And a lot of people actually don't even put the RF shielding back into their consoles. I don't know why. But yeah, just something to remember. So yeah, get a whole lot of dish detergent in there. That's what I like to do. And I usually fill this whole damn thing up. Get it all nice and soapy. And then what I do is start putting pieces in. Actually, I usually start with the bottom tray. I literally pop it right in there, let it soak up water, and then I start putting the smaller pieces inside of it. Knew that was gonna happen. Thank goodness for waterproof phones, right? So the good news is it didn't actually get on the phone at all. It was all on the case and outside of the case. Everything's fine, but the phone's waterproof anyway, so we're golden. As you can see, we're starting to build up quite a bit of soap here. I'm gonna now drop in top shell, get that nice and, in there. And now I'm going to very quickly, I'm gonna just pop that in for a second. Same thing with this one. Spray it. This is so gross. Look at that. That's nasty. There's only one way I'm getting that off. When in doubt, old toothbrush always does the trick. There's tons of people online screaming at me right now like, no, what are you doing? It's gonna rust. Look, this thing's like 40 years old, okay? It's got rust on it already. It's dirty. It needs to be cleaned as best it can. And even if all the dirt doesn't come off, which that doesn't look like it is, that looks like a giant spot of rust. At least it's clean. So you know it's kind of clean to the touch. So there's that. Get all the soap off of there. Set that to the side for just a minute. Same thing with the other one. Paper towel. Get all the excess wetness off that you can. And now I'm going to put these under a fan to just air dry them and get all the excess moisture off for just a few minutes. Top shell. Now this is about as good as this is going to get, okay? You can try to scrub this stuff off. You can even use like a, if you have one, I don't know if I do. So one thing that's really good to get like marks and stuff off of this thing, you probably can't see it, would be like a magic eraser. Typically those magic erasers are really good at removing marks like this. That's because it's like actually a really high grit sandpaper basically and a magic eraser. If that's all you're trying to do though, you can get these off. In my case, I really just wanted to clean it so that it's, you know, a clean surface, but we're actually going to be sanding this, wet sanding it, and painting it. A lot of people are cringing that I just said that. However, I don't like retro brighting stuff. I've seen mixed results on it in the past. Sometimes it just comes out looking really bad and really ugly. And it's my preference anyway, it's my project. With this, it's just so yellow that I don't think it's really worth it, in my opinion, to even try. I'm just gonna sand it and paint it. I do suggest really going into these little grooves here as best as you can. And actually what I typically do is just go over it with straight Dawn, just a ton of it, nuke it, and then just really try to get in there. Go at it from the other side too. Also really good to check around the edges to make sure there's no dirt buildup on either of those for the outer shell. Something else I kind of forgot to mention is the stickers on the bottom shell. In this case, they were already pretty bad off, so I'm not really concerned about, you know, conserving them when they're already that faded. The bottom stickers, however, are really, really resilient. These typically you can just wash this whole thing and you don't even have to worry about these metal stickers on the bottom. They hold their own if you're trying to preserve them. Again, inspect your little parts, make sure there's no dirt in the grooves. Usually the soak gets rid of all of it, but you can go over it with the toothbrush just in case if you want to. Now this final bit, as I said, there's springs in here, there's metal stuff in here, and you're gonna try your best to not get those wet. There's also metal in here. In this case, it's just so gross that it's gonna do more good than harm, I think, to just soak it for a minute and then air dry it. Of course, I also soak up all of the excess wetness that I can around the metal. And then we're gonna boil the pin connector. Definitely better to use a smaller pot, but it works. Starting to feel like I'm making Nintendo soup. The idea behind this is that the pins kind of bend back into place and just get clean. Okay, so that's at a rolling boil, which means it's done. Soup's on. Now a lot of people have their preferred ways of cleaning these boards. For me, it's pretty simple, and I apologize for the shaky camera. I'm holding it up with my knee. What I like to do is just get some 99% cleaning solution here, alcohol, and just kind of go over the parts that look particularly egregious to me. You know, most of this is probably not going to make a difference, but you can see just how much dirt we're picking up here. I like to just kind of go over it and then sweep off anything I see. This can obviously be a very long process, so I won't show you the whole thing, but you get the idea. These things get pretty dirty over the years. I also like to clean the pin connectors. That usually helps quite a bit with making sure the games read, so you definitely want to make sure you do that. By the end of this process, you know, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a lot cleaner than it was before. My final step is just a little bit of light air dusting. Second Nintendo has also been deconstructed and cleaned, and what a difference that made. Pretty much all of the marker, crayon, whatever it was on here, it all came off. And now that we have all of that done, I like to turn a fan on in the room, leave everything kind of splayed out, let it really dry well, and then we will move on later. Okay, so it's the next day and everything's had a chance to dry now. So you can see everything's all nice and dry. I think I've decided that I'm not going to paint this shell. I think what I'm going to try before I do anything to that one is try painting this shell. This is a replacement shell that I believe I picked up from Castlemania. You can get them in lots of different places, but it's a see-through clear plastic smoked black shell. What I want to do actually is paint the inside. I've done this on Game Boys before in the past where you paint the insides, and when you do that, it gives you these really cool defined lines around edges and stuff. So we're going to see if that works on this. If not, then it won't really matter because we can just sand the outside of it, paint it on the outside, and you would never know that there's paint on the inside. So we're going to try that. And of course, if that works out and painting the inside of the clear shell black looks good, I'm just going to keep this gray because gray and black will look pretty good together. But if not, we will move on to the other idea of painting both of these, and I have a pretty good idea of how I want to paint it because it's my project, and I think it would be fun to have something a little bit different. But first, we're going to try the other way. Our boiled pin connector is looking nice, clean, and shiny, and all the other parts look good as well. And this is the part where I like to put everything back together a little bit, just to make sure that everything still works and maybe even works better. So now we have a flashing yellow/gray screen. We didn't have that before. So that's actually a pretty good sign because we had no activity before when we had nothing plugged in. So this will be a little bit finicky. You actually kind of need the screws in the control deck to hold it down in place most of the time, but we're gonna see if we get anything doing it this way. Let's hit the reset here. Look at that. Looks great. That's all it needed was a cleaning. That pin connector was probably dirty and all bent out of shape. Now, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Make sure the controls work. Everything's working. Awesome. See, like I said, I don't believe any Nintendo is truly a broken Nintendo beyond repair. So now that we know that everything works, this is the part where I decide what I'm going to paint, which, as we said, I'm going to start by trying this clear shell here, and I do have the door for it as well. So we're going to start by trying with that one, and if it doesn't turn out the way I want it to, we have this, and I have a paint job idea for that. I am not going to be painting all the little trim things because I want those to be black anyway, and you know, less is more. They look fine anyway, so we're not painting those at all. Those are staying as they are. So it's not exactly the sunniest day out today, so I don't know if we'll actually get to painting, but we can at least tape off the parts that we don't want any paint to get to, which is mostly the outside. So we have everything on the outside covered the way that I need it covered, but the tricky part is the cartridge door, because you don't want anything getting on that little part too, so you need to kind of make sure you have all that covered. And it's a little tricky, so just make sure you get it right. You get it all covered, because those are the parts you don't want any paint in. And that's just kind of an idea of what the cartridge slot should look like. It's not the best. You can actually get in here better. It's a step I kind of missed, but this will do. This will be fine. And if you're painting the cartridge door, this is how I suggest taping that off. Just make sure you cover the rods that go in to the console so that it flips up, because that could create some friction issues with opening and closing it. Just something to be aware of. And so now we're all ready to paint it, and we'll see how it turns out. Something to note I forgot to mention before, this shell has two holes, one up here and one down here, where you can see screws broke off in it. These shells are meant to be used with the screws that come with them, not the ones that originally are Nintendo, so just take note of that. Don't make the same mistake I did. And I'm just using Krylon Fusion all-in-one. It's matte black, and I'm going to do it on the cartridge door first to see how it looks before we do the main case. It's really cold out today, so I'm sorry if I sound a little rough. And now while we wait for it to dry, we place some Helldivers too. might notice I went like exceptionally heavy in the corners. That's because you can see through the case the green and the blue tape. You don't want to be able to see any of that, because if you can see that from the inside, you'll be able to see it from the outside when it's done. So you want to get as much coverage as you can. Alright, so let's see what our results are looking like here. It's dried, mostly. Looks like this corner isn't. Probably because it hasn't been in the sun. Well, maybe it has. That still needs a little bit of drying there. I think that we got everything mostly coated though. Probably good to take the tape off and then see what we're working with. Well, the mess is really accumulating now, but you can see the results are pretty slick. This door right now that I have on here is one from a previous project that's painted from the outside. The reason I have that on there right now is because, well, for one, it doesn't look too bad, but the shell, when it shipped to me from Castlemania, you can see it had some imperfections on the outside. It had this kind of like almost sticky stuff on it. I don't know. I have tried to clean it off. I'm going to try to clean it off again, but you can see just by trying to clean it off, it just made it more scratched and stuff. So it doesn't look super great. I guess you wouldn't really tell that much in low lighting anyway. So we're just going to go with this one. I don't think it looks too bad, actually. Kind of matches the little trim piece here. Overall, I think this turned out pretty well for using salvage parts. Alright, well, it's now a few days later, but we are going to do a few things. We are going to recap some of the stuff in here to hopefully get rid of the wavy lines. We're going to desolder these two caps and solder them back in at an angle so that we can put the new RGB mod board on top of that and get it all installed. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of extra solder to these 2 points here to get that big cap off, since I believe that's the one causing those wavy line issues. I noticed when I tapped it, those lines would kind of go away for a second. So I think that's the cap that's giving us issues. So if we replace that, we should be good. Also, my soldering iron is super dirty. Don't be like me. You should probably clean this more often, but it'll work for now. And all the things people say about replacing caps on this board are true. It does smell like fish when you start burning it. It wasn't just that cap, so we're gonna have to replace all the caps. I will come back to this later. We're gonna move on to the one that I'm actually gonna do the RGB mod on. All right, so what we wanna do now is desolder the PPU right here. And we're gonna desolder these two caps here and reinstall them sideways so that we can lay the board on top of it. So to get to the PPU, we're gonna flip it over. And these two lines right here are the two that we're gonna be desoldering. I'm going to try to just go straight at it with the desoldering gun first and see how that goes. Okay, so now we're going to see if we can just pop it out. Alright, so it took a lot of finagling, but I did get it out. I just kept going over the points on the other side with my desoldering gun, and while it was in there, I would just kind of wiggle from the other side. I would, wiggle from side to side. I could see which pins were still stuck and which ones were moving as I jiggled from side to side, and eventually they all came out. Okay, I grabbed out the recording arm in the hopes that that might make things a little bit easier here. for you guys to see. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna solder this little pin connector that comes in the NES RGB kit onto the board where the PPU was, making sure that we get the little circle part here lined up with the circle part down here. So you probably couldn't see everything there, but I turned a light on to hopefully help a little bit. I just soldered the 2 corner pins here so that it would stay in place. Now we can go ahead and do the other pins. I'm gonna try drag soldering for the first time. Probably gonna mess it up, but gotta give it a shot, right? Now we're gonna remove these and put them back in at the right angle. It's getting really hard to do this without putting it really close to my face, but all I did was desolder here and here, got the caps out, bent the pins a little bit, and just got them in here so this one's bent over to the right and this one's bent down a little bit. So now you can put the NES RGB board on top of it without anything hitting it. So now we're going to put the pin headers into the little connector thing we just added, and those will kind of push right in. It's kind of a pain, literally. You want to try to get them all in at the same time, basically. So this is our NES RGB board, and this is going to be going on here. And these lines, we're going to use the top set, basically. This is something I learned and almost forgot to do in this video. I learned this on my first install of the NES RGB mod. You actually, if you're doing the Voltar kit, that I would highly suggest using, it makes things so much easier. A lot of people are going to have you soldering wires to these to connect everything. With the Voltar kit, you have the multi-out, so you can just plug in a ribbon cable here, and you don't need all those wires. You could try to put it on here. However, I found a video and it made more sense to me. The way the guy did it was he literally just connects these right here. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing it the same way. If you look closely here, you'll see the entire through this entire board are connections. So as long as you have solder connecting those and going into those holes, this will work fine. We're actually going to do it again on the underside of the board. It'll be under everything, so when you put it down, you won't even be able to see it. Now, I don't necessarily know that I would recommend doing it like this. However, it worked for me last time, so I'm going to do it again. You can see here I've poked the solder from the other side in a little loop like this. That's just to make sure that I have it lined up here, and I'm going to just solder. That way we can have everything lined up. So that's why I did it that way. Probably not the best way to do it, but it works for me, so I'm going to do it again. I'm not a professional. I'm just trying to get this done. So again, not the prettiest soldering job, but it's on there. The first time I did one of these, I put it in the wrong way. You actually want to put the blue side down. You want the contacts facing up. We'll just click that right back in. So now the next issue you'll probably have, unless you're really good at soldering, and I'm seeing that I have an issue now too as well, where I'm going to need to fix those pins there. But anyway, I filled a hole right there, but that's not a huge deal. We can fix that just with some soldering, like we can get the stuff out of the hole. We need to trim these right here so that when we put this in, it can actually go down. See, right now it's not able to really pop in there. So we can fix that by trimming those, and then we'll be able to get everything in. Okay, so now we're going to put together the multi-out, which is going to connect to this and make putting cables in a lot easier. Once again, remember the blue side actually goes down. I messed that up on my first one. Pop those out very carefully and put it right in. So in theory, we should have a working NES RGB mod now, for the most part. There's a couple more steps we need to go through. Alright, it's a couple days later. I still haven't trimmed my nails. Oh well, get over it. So now what we're going to do is tin some of these pads on this thing and close some jumpers, maybe open some jumpers, and get everything ready for the actual RGB stuff. I won't go into what that actually does. You should watch a real tutorial if that's something you want to know. Next, I'm going to take 2 wires. We're going to connect some points on the wire here, specifically I believe these top 2, or these first 2 on the left here, to a plate on the original board here. I'm actually going to attach them to R4 and R3 right here. Right there. And people always like to give me shit for long fingernails, but check this out. No end. Oh wow, look at that. We have an end. Fingernails come in handy for things sometimes. Something that I totally forgot that you don't have to do when you're using the multi-out. You don't have to solder these things. It's not really a big deal if you did. But you don't need them because you don't need to solder those wires to them. That's what I get for watching someone else's tutorial brainlessly while I did this. This is an additional voltage regulator, and as the video states that I am watching, it is true. If you don't install this, your heatsink gets super hot. It was something that even I noticed when I wasn't watching the video. The heatsink got really hot. With this, we make sure that we're not getting things overheated and nothing goes wrong. Now we wire 2 of the thin wires we just did on the power regulator to the actual little thing here on the original power board. And I like to pre-tin those 2 points before I do. And now our other 2 wires go onto the ground in the 5-volt. So now in this mess of wires and boards and bad soldering, which I see a point I need to fix more already, we should have a working NES RGB mod, and the way I'm going to test that is with S-Video. So we got it booted up, we got a picture, we got sound. The problem is the picture we got indicates that perhaps there's something wrong with the PPU. Now my hope is, and my guess is, that it's actually just one of these solder points here is not good enough. And actually looking at some of them now, it looks like maybe after they dried, or maybe I just couldn't see it before, some of them are a little bit open, so we're gonna try that and see if that fixes it. So, as expected, there was an issue with the PPU soldering. Those points that looked kind of bad, we retouched them, and look at this now. We have a working NES RGB mod. Now, there are a couple of things I still need to test. I don't think my key commands are working to change palettes or to reset, so I do need to look at that. But the good news is everything's working, that we need to actually play. So that's good. So I remembered immediately after I got everything working and making sure everything, actually still works. I remembered why the palette switch and the reset aren't working. That's because you have to actually solder these to the controller 1 port. And I remember when I did this on my first one, I melted this plastic piece. So we're actually going to try to do it from the other side this time and hopefully not burn or melt it. If you do melt this a little bit, it's not a huge deal, but it is a big deal if you melt it off completely. So we don't want to do that. But we're going to basically be soldering some points from here with wires to points on the controller, which will allow us to switch those palettes and do an in-game reset with a button combination. So the final thing we need to do, and the thing that I unfortunately think my phone's going to run out of battery to do, we need to drill a hole into the back of the shell of the NES right here so that we can have this piece sit and go inside of it so that we can have the multi-out installed. By the time you're done with your drill and your Dremel tool, it'll look something like that, which looks like crap before you put it in, but once you put in the multi-out, you won't even see that, so it won't be a problem. Also, don't be reckless like me and do it with these things in there. Take them out, otherwise you have the risk of shavings getting to them. It's just not fun. I'm going to air dust it, so it won't be a huge issue, but just something to note. So as you can see, now that it's popped in, you cannot tell how bad it actually looked before. Alright, well, it's really hard to show, but if you hit start and select and left and right, you can change palettes, and if you hit A, B, start and select, the console will reset. So let's try it real quick. I'm going to try first the reset. Hey, what do you know, it works. And then the second thing, which is going to be really hard for you guys to see, especially with the light directly on the screen, palette switching. So you can probably see very subtly the colors changing with each button press. Pretty cool, right?